My first client actually came from Reddit post, and they were interested in the product.
And can I ask how much they paid you for that?
Somewhere in the low six figures. You don't necessarily have to start with great connections. Putting out great work is really probably the best thing you can do to get clients. As a founder, that your job is to replace yourself as fast as humanly possible at every role, because you start with every role. I would say the biggest danger as a founder is not that you starve, it's that you drown. One of the things I think that I wish I had done differently looking back is...
All right, bit of a different video today. I'm joined with Andy Walters, a guy that I met on Twitter exactly 3 or 4 weeks ago. But this episode/video concept was just too good to pass up. So we're doing our first remote one today. Andy, well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I'm going to read out the tweet, which is actually how I found you. There were 2 tweets. The first one was from someone else, and it said, chatted with someone today doing $30,000 a month with 4 clients building basic AI apps. The clients needed to show investors that they were AI forward and were willing to pay. And so Andy replies to this, I'm making $130,000 a month doing this. Started as a solo dev 10 months ago and now up to a team of 9. We work with SaaS and mid-market legacy companies building custom generative AI implementations. And so Andy, I think the purpose of this episode, or the goal with this, is I really want to be able to give everyone listening the blueprint to be able to go from solo dev that kind of knows a little bit of AI to also making $100,000 a month. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, absolutely, it's possible. I suppose I'm living proof. So yeah, 100%.
So let's start off with zooming out. What is this agency and how does it work?
Yeah, so we're a generative AI consultancy and dev shop, and we kind of have 2 arms. We solve 2 problems. One is what to build with generative AI, and the other problem we solve is finding the resources to build it well. So there's a lot of folks on the consulting side that are curious about generative AI. They know that they need to do something with generative AI at their company. They're not sure what. And so we have a framework that we can walk people through to help them rank opportunities and really find high ROI opportunities to execute on. And then on the development side, we're grinding. We're building out the solutions that we've either proposed or clients have come to us with.
And so when did you start this agency?
So we started about 10 months ago.
10 months
it started
ago,
with just me.
Started with just you. Okay. So if we want to start from the very beginning, someone's listening to this and they want to get to 100K a month. The first thing they have to do is figure out their first client. So where does your first client come from?
That's great. My first client actually came. So before this company, I had a SaaS company, and that was a super small operation. It was bare bones. It was me and a co-founder, and we had a client reach out to us after we did I think it was a Reddit post, and they were interested in the product. But really, we just started talking, and they started talking about their business and what they wanted to do with generative AI. And so we created a relationship, and they were our first client.
And what were the terms? What were you actually selling them?
So selling them, time and materials, custom development, right? So we worked with them to take their company from being the company is called Local Falcon. I can talk about them. They're totally cool with it. And they're a local SEO platform. So they will tell you how you're ranking within a 1-mile radius on Google Maps. But although they were good at telling you how you're ranking, they weren't great yet at telling you how you could improve your rankings, tailored specific advice. And so we designed an AI system that would do that for the users, and still running today, and still gets really sort of rave reviews from their user base. So that's the solution we ended up delivering.
And can I ask how much they paid you for that?
Yeah, good question. Offhand, it's tough for me to say, but it's probably somewhere in the low 6 figures. So we did a series of things for them. We did, some consulting work around what the right solution would be to build, and also kind of getting the domain expertise out of their heads and into software. We also did reporting for them. So we built a bunch of reports that have these tailored recommendations. And then we also built an assistant. So that's why it's hard to say exactly offhand how much one particular piece of it costs, but on the order of low 6 figures, that account has been worth, and we love them. They're great clients.
And so this is like spread monthly, right? Like you're not just pitching them, hey,
Yeah.
you're going to pay us $200,000 for XYZ.
A month, right, right. No, nope. We charge on a hourly basis, time and materials, and so yeah, we started with it started just me, and then I brought in one of my friends who I had known who also had a generative AI SaaS company that he let go. And that was like the big step for me and kind of like an aha moment when I was able to, all of a sudden the agency was making money with somebody else's time, not just mine. And that the light bulb kind of went on like, oh, this is scalable. Just keep doing this and you can build a business.
And what was your friend initially doing?
So he initially and still to this day, he's a developer on the account. So he was just helping with the feature work, right? Like we kind of divide and conquered, and he built certain features. He really did a lot of the AI assistant work. So
That
yeah,
makes sense. And so a lot of people are kind of able to get their first client, right? Whether it's through Reddit, whether it's through a friend of a friend, whether it's through posting on LinkedIn.
yeah,
What, but then how did you go from that first one to number two, number three, number four, etc.?
right. Yeah, great question. And on the first client bit, I would say like, we sort of got lucky in that we had that client reach out to us. But if you're a dev and you're starting out and you don't necessarily have some connections like that, like one thing you can do is just like put out something cool, put out cool work where people will see that like, oh, this guy knows how to do, like in my case, generative AI, and the people's kind of, juices will get flowing, their creative juices, and they may reach out to you. That's happened to me every time I put out something cool, even on Twitter. I will get people reach out to me and be like, hey, we're trying to look to build something similar. So you don't necessarily have to start with great connections. And I would say like as a founder, I think I have I've started with a pretty, how to say it, like a network that's not full of a bunch of rich and famous people just waiting to throw money at me, because sometimes I look at other founders and like, wow, you went to Stanford and like no surprise, you got $1 billion in funding on day one or whatever, that was not me, and so like you don't have to have that, but putting out great work is really probably the best thing you can do to get clients. In terms of the specific tactics we used, we've had success in a couple of different channels. So one has been outbound cold email and outbound LinkedIn.
So you've had
Both of
success with outbound cold emails.
Yeah, shockingly, I did
Wait,
not
walk me
expect it to
through
work.
it.
Yeah.
How does it work?
So I went into I got referred to this agency. Another founder friend of mine said, yeah, they've done a good job. And so I talked to them. It's called the Veth Group. They're great. And I had a meeting with them and I was like, look, I want to be your best client because I need leads. So like, what do I do? Like you tell me and I'll just take your suggestions, right? And so they said, okay, the number one thing is just do what we tell you to do on copy. Don't fight us on the copy. And I'm like, okay, so what should we put in the copy? And they said, do this. And so our emails basically run something like this. The subject line is something like, do you like whiskey? And then the pitch is like, hey, we'd love to send you a bottle of Whistle Pig for one shot at pitching you on how we can help your company with generative AI. Clients are turning to us for process automation, help with their tech team, so on. Let us know. Something like that. And man, I'm telling you, that has opened so many doors, shocking numbers of doors. It's easily paid for itself in terms of the cost of the account with Veth. And so I've got like 50 bottles of whiskey at my house at any given time, and we're just like rolling through it for our sales appointments.
That's so interesting. And so let's say you kind of send that email out. Do you have a follow-up sequence,
Yeah.
or is that just one email enough?
No, there is a follow-up sequence. It's, like I forget exactly what it is. Part of the reason that I got an agency to do it was like cold email just sucks. Like trying to manage all of the domains and all of the nonsense that goes into it. Like
Email warming and all of those, the
oh
deliverability,
God,
everything.
like I'm an engineer. I could figure it out, but I really don't want to. It's the same reason I pay somebody to mow my lawn instead of doing it myself. Like, please, someone else make this your problem. I will happily pay you, right? So anyway, so I don't remember the exact follow-ups, but it's stuff like, well, how about would any mornings work? I think that's one of them. I don't remember. There's a few different sequences that they run. And yeah, it generates leads, believe it or not.
That's so interesting. And how much did this agency cost?
It's $2,500 a month, so not a bad.
$2,500 a month. That's very worth it. Absolutely. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's how your cold emails worked. Let's talk about LinkedIn outreach.
So LinkedIn outreach. So I use something called LinkedIn Helper, which is a little bot that sits on your LinkedIn profile and just messages people. And well, actually, it does a couple things. It likes and comments, or no, it doesn't comment. I don't like the comment thing, but it does like posts of people, and then it'll go back and I think follow them, and then after that, it'll go and shoot them an opening message. I use the same pitch, like, "Hey, love to send you a bottle of whiskey," and it's a great pitch.
Oh, wow.
Like people love it. Yep, and so that's opened doors for us too.
It sounds like it's a lot simpler than people make it out to be. It's just having a good hook.
I'm telling you about what worked. I should also tell you about all the things that didn't work because I tried.
What are some of the things that you thought would work that didn't?
I tried so many things, and like probably all the things I tried would have worked if I kept going, but it was just the level of investment. So one thing I tried was like a webinar thing, right? And so like I got my buddy together, the developer I was with. We put on this webinar. And it took so much effort. Like 20% of the people who signed up came, and not that many people really signed up anyway. And we got like zero leads from that whatsoever. And yeah, so not a great solution. I tried Google Ads. Freaking nightmare to manage Google Ads if you're trying to do it yourself. They nickel and dime you in every possible way, and they'll get you clicks, but like I was like, oh, I'm getting so many clicks, and I looked like, where's it coming from? Like, well, video games, like people on their mobile phone are clicking on your app. I'm like, okay, this is not like, thanks for the clicks, Google. I'm glad I paid for that. So like that was a pain. And I don't know, there's probably other stuff too. It's not coming to mind, but I tried a number of things, and these were the ones that seemed to work. Now, the other thing too is like after you get going and you do good work, then we have gotten referrals, and that's been a huge part of our business. I would say that's probably 50 to 60% maybe now. But in the beginning, we didn't have anything really to show, so except for like
that makes sense.
Yeah.
During the summer, I was starting to put together a fund, or I was starting to raise a fund, and there was this one cold email sequence that worked like magic, and the subject was intro. And I totally ripped this from Brett Adcock. It was his
Adcock.
name,
Yeah, Brett Adcock.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, right, the figure guy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so the email was, the subject was intro, and then I'm reading out the email. It was, hey, so-and-so, my name is Omar Waseem, and I'm the founder of Aleph, a private accelerator for Muslim founders advised by partners at, and then I listed a bunch of VC firms. Prior to this, I was the first growth hire at Founders Inc., a venture fund / studio, and the CMO of an algorithmic stablecoin. We raised $20 million from A16Z and exited for $2 billion. Do you have time for a call? And every single person, obviously not every single person, but a lot of people, I think it was something like 60% reply rate, replied to it and said, yes, absolutely, would love time for a call. Here's my calendar link, adding my assistant, whatever. And the fact that I had intro, it was the highest open rate, especially because like investors, because that's the people we were targeting, are very likely to open intro emails versus maybe a software engineer or any other person.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's genius. A 60% open or reply rate is like wild, like off the charts wild. That's amazing. One of the things I would say too is like I was pretty excited by how successful the campaign was with cold email, but looking back, I'm actually not sure that it was that tactic that was so amazing, so much as it is that just there is a lot of hunger and interest in generative AI right now, like just a kind of ambient interest. And so it was timed really well. Yeah.
I think the timing and the product are a big part. Like even for this email, every single person I sent it to was a Muslim like investor or GP based in like the Middle East or the Gulf Coast. And so
Yeah.
all of those people to hear about a Muslim accelerator based in San Francisco, that's very personally interesting to them. My
Right.
roommate has an agency that I helped him start up called Founders Arm. Basically, what they do is they connect early stage startups with virtual assistants, specifically that are meant
Oh
for like
yeah.
growth. So like influencer marketing, cold emails, whatever. And I
Yeah.
remember one of the first things he did when he started the company was he went on my podcast and he made the subject line, "Saw you on Omar's pod," and then comma, and then some like question. And he opened it with a picture of himself, and then he said, "Hey," and it's like some long email about how he wasted his time at his last company and felt like his whole life was a sham. And then he figured out delegation, virtual assistants, whatever. And the email was just funny. And so everyone was replying to him, and I'll try to get a screenshot, but they were like, "Yo, I love this email so much. This is the best cold email I've ever gotten. Want to get on a call just because of how good this email was." And a few months
Yeah.
later, like, there was whatever nurturing sequence, and a lot of those people started to close. And there was
Yeah.
like an aspect of, obviously they know me, they were on my podcast. So there's like 50 people. They know it's not just an email that's sent to everyone. There's
Right.
a level of personalization that comes from knowing that there's a warm intro, knowing that they watched their podcast, and then maybe being
Yes.
curious to hear what he would have to say about their podcast.
Yeah.
And every single person on my podcast is a startup founder. And he was
Yeah.
selling specifically to startup founders. And it was a very
Right.
targeted niche product. And so everyone would
Brilliant.
get on a call with him.
That is awesome. Yeah. And the thing I think, like, for people who are starting out, the thing is, like, just keep trying. Like, you'll stumble on something that works eventually, as long as you sort of keep at it, right? And like, don't be like stupid about it, but like, if you keep at it, you'll probably find something, because there's a ton of demand out there right now for generative AI stuff. So like, this or that, like, the tactic doesn't really matter so much as just getting out there and trying. That's the
Absolutely.
main thing.
And so now let's assume that the person watching this has gotten their first couple of clients. What are
Yeah.
the mistakes or what are the pitfalls that you kind of fall into after you had your first few clients?
Yeah. Let's see. I think there's some mistakes I avoided, and so I'll talk about those. I came from a background of having worked at dev shops and worked as like I started as a dev and then worked my way into project management and then like leadership. So I was like managing director and VP of a couple of different dev shops, a few different. And so I've kind of been around the block. I've seen where these things can go off the rails. Not that I'm a genius at it or whatever, but I had a little bit of like a unfair advantage in that I'd done some of this before. So, one of the things I was very careful to do is as soon as we got to a scale where we could support it, I brought in a project manager, which was only recently, but it was a perfect timing. That is so important, to have somebody who is keeping track of details and whose job it is to make sure that you're delivering, that you're on track with scope, that you're managing risk properly. That's like just an extremely important thing that you could easily miss. I would say like the biggest danger as a founder is not that you starve, it's that you drown, right? It's probably not that you're going to be starving for work. It's the bigger danger is you're just going to be drowning in work. You've got so much and you start not being able to deliver well. And then that is a death spiral for your company. So that was one thing. I also worked to abstract myself from the day-to-day coding as fast as I could. Although I love coding, it's really fun. At the same time, it's not sustainable to have to like run the business and be the coder. Because you're wearing all the hats in the beginning, but eventually you've got to get out of the coding to some degree. Like I still code a little bit, like a little side project here or there for clients or whatever. That's super fun and keeps me fresh. But that's another thing I think that I did well. Some mistakes. Let's see. One of the things I think that I wish I had done differently looking back is brought in, and it would have been hard to do, but still bringing in talent that is ready to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Just kind of like animal level talent. I was really looking for, at the beginning, I was looking for other folks who could like throw 10, 20 hours a week to help me out, which is great. And they're all great people. And at the same time, now our culture has shifted. And so now we're looking for like a different type of person who's got a lot more to invest and throw it. And really, we're looking for people as it's their main thing, right? So maybe it would have been possible to get to that point a little bit earlier in the journey. Might have been good. Yeah, I'm sure there's other mistakes. I'm sure they'll come up as we're talking. They'll come to me.
How did you decide on pricing? Because I feel like one thing people do wrong a lot is they underprice or they
Yeah,
completely
that's a good point.
overprice.
Yeah, it's a great point. Boy, pricing is so hard. I think it's one of the hardest things that founders have to deal with. I went off of kind of what I'd known about how much software development typically goes for. So, like I said, I worked in agency leadership, so I kind of knew like a standard rate card for if you go to an agency and get work done. But I came from the web world doing that stuff, and I knew generative AI was pretty hot. So, like in the web world, you're charging a lot if you're 150 an hour. Like I think a lot of folks in the web web agency, you are like 100 to 150 hour, especially if you have offshore talent. So I just added $50 basically, right? So we charge 200 an hour. And my pitch to clients is like, if you go to Silicon Valley, you're going to find $300, $400, $500 an hour for an AI engineer. But we don't live in Silicon Valley, so we can arbitrage cost of living. And that pitch seems to work well. So
So if you're
yeah, so
at
those
two
are our
hundred
rates.
dollars an hour though, or sorry, if you're at
Yeah.
$200 an hour though, and that's like 40 hours a week, that in itself is $8,000 right there.
Yeah,
And so
correct.
multiply that by four, that's around $32,000 per like ticket that you're or per
Yeah.
client.
Oh yeah, for
Who
sure.
who is
And
paying these?
who has this much money?
Like who is paying for developers and paying agencies? Like I think about startups, they're able to
Yeah.
get really high quality talent for like 15 to 20K a month.
Yeah.
Or like behemoths.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So
Okay.
yeah. I mean, yes, most startups can, I think, but there are reasons why startups might go with agencies, and actually, a big part of our clientele is startups. There's a couple of reasons. One is, the founder may not have a tech team to start with, right? And they may be in a situation where they need to move fast and have access to a team that can scale up and down very easily. So if you hire employees, right, those are mouths you then have to feed sort of continuously with at least not without some serious pain in removing them. And so if you hire an agency, you get like super high quality talent right out of the gate, and it's scalable. And you also get somebody else whose responsibility it is to manage the technical risk on a product. And theoretically, that agency, depending on how they're structured, may even absorb some of the risk in case things go badly, right? So you get a little bit more of a guarantee that the product that you want to build is going to be built. So those are some of the reasons that I think startup founders can choose to work with agencies. Of course, like you said, most startups are not that way. They want to build an in-house team, and that's totally fine. The other thing too is like sometimes it's just hard to find talent that really gets generative AI. Like right now, it's still so niche. Like I know, like I live on Twitter, probably a lot of your listeners live on Twitter, and it feels like everybody knows about this.
Yeah,
And like
calling generative AI niche is kind of crazy.
right. But once you get into the real world, like that's not the case. I mean, startups more so. Everybody, if you're a startup now, you don't have generative AI expertise. Like, what are you doing? But at the same time, it's still hard to find the talent. Like, there's a lot of engineers who know nothing about generative AI who couldn't build you a RAG application if you wanted them to, right? So, so demonstrating like technical leadership is key, and if you can do that, there may be a reason to pay a little bit more for an agency.
So what kinds of companies are paying for it? What are some of the demographics of the people that are paying you right now?
Yeah. So we have a few different clusters of clients. We have like a startup slash SaaS cluster where it's anything from like a startup needing, like we're doing some really interesting things. I can't say too much, but in like the audio AI space where we're training models from scratch. So you could need deep ML stuff all the way up to like hey, we have an existing startup or an existing SaaS company, and we want to bring generative AI features in. So we want to build an AI assistant on top of our stack, something like that. So that's kind of that cluster. Another cluster is what I would call kind of legacy companies or companies that have legacy technology sets. So that's a lot of like internal process automation. That's another big piece. And those are our big ones. We're trying to push more now that the company is growing. We're trying to push more into the enterprise space. And so learning more about like the Microsoft version of all of the AI, the generative AI stuff out there. And those clients are, much bigger contracts, much bigger scopes, and those are typically your $1 billion plus type of enterprises. We're not there yet, but we're trying to push into it.
Absolutely. So let's take the first cluster and kind of break it down. You're saying these are startups. You're kind of building sometimes more technical, kind of like building out features for them. What stage are these companies at? I'm assuming if they're able to pay you the amount of money that you're asking, they're at least Series A, Series B.
Actually, no. A lot of them are seed. Although we do.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if you get a decent enough sized seed round, you can fund a company like ours working with you to like a single generative AI engineer for a reasonable amount of time. So yeah, so it's actually a lot of seed.
And you're reaching out to the CEOs, or who are you targeting in Apollo?
Only CEOs. I've realized now that especially a smaller company, it's with smaller teams, like I guess under maybe 50 people, I really don't talk to anybody other than the CEO because nobody else has the kind of strategic directive and impetus to bring generative AI into their company and the ability to make it happen from the purse strings, right? So they're really the person that makes sense to talk to.
And are these like YC companies, or are they like they're based in like Austin, New York, places that
Right.
aren't literally San Francisco?
They're not YC companies. No. I don't think we've ever worked with a kind of traditional SF funded company.
Interesting. So these are just like startups that are still tech companies, but they're not based in San Francisco.
Right.
They don't have access to the
Nashville,
Waterloo engineers at the hackathons.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Nashville startups, the Pennsylvania startups. Like, yeah, these folks are out there and they're just like wildly underserved.
That's awesome. Okay, and then if we take the second cluster, these are kind of larger companies that are legacy companies, and you're helping them maybe add their workflows or build an assistant or whatever. Who are you reaching out to at these bigger companies?
Those companies, the CTO is our kind of go-to. Very similar, like the CTO typically has generative AI on their roadmap. They know they need to do something. They're struggling with like, do we hire the talent internally, or do we go outside for outside expertise? And so part of the way we pitch ourselves there is like, hey, we can also kind of teach your developers as we're going along how to do some of this stuff. So there's a little bit of like a learn by osmosis pitch there. And but some companies also don't care about that, and they just want us to solve a single problem, and that's fine. So it kind of depends on the company.
And so these are also like, you're reaching out to CTOs. These are what, 11 to 50 people companies? Are they bigger, or what kind of companies are these?
Bigger, more like 200 to, I don't know, call it 5,000 person type companies. Yeah.
And you're reaching out directly to the CTO on like Apollo or something?
Yeah, exactly. What my agency is. Yeah, 100%. And like, it's shocking how like I get a ton of cold email all the time, and like occasionally I do respond, right? And as long as you're just one of the ones that like occasionally gets a response, if you send out enough, like you'll get a response. Now,
do you know how many emails you're sending out per week?
That's such a great question. I think it's like 10,000 a month. I think is
Okay.
what we do. Yeah.
If you're up for it, after this, we're gonna take like 5 minutes and figure out the answers to these open
Yeah,
questions, put them in an email list, and put it in the description. So if anyone wants to get access
totally.
to the email templates or whatever, they can get them for
Yeah,
free.
I'm down.
Awesome. But damn, that's so interesting. I feel like cold email is so overlooked. I literally just saw a tweet yesterday that went viral, which was like, bro, just stop worrying about cold email and go build a TikTok.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing I was gonna say. Like, there's a ton of channels, right? And like you can probably find success on any of those channels. I think it's about finding the channel that works for you. And that has seemed to work well. Like Twitter's also worked well for us too. We've gotten a reasonable amount of business. Actually, we've got a huge amount of business from Twitter. But that has been very kind of random. Like I find Twitter to be a place that's difficult to like consistently get results from. But if I have a tweet like that tweet that you started the podcast off with, that went viral, and then people reach out to me from that, like, which was that sort of thing happens like every so often, and then it can be valuable. So yeah, it's not that I'm like necessarily a huge believer in cold email as like the great, the greatest channel or whatever. It's more just like try it and see what works and like keep going. And there's probably, I mean, as we are growing, I'm becoming more and more interested in being brought in as the expert in a situation where like, so one of the other things we just became partners with Llama Index. So we're now listed as expert partners on their website. And so building partnerships like that, we have another one that we just signed with a company called Tiny Fish that puts out a product called Agent QL, which is a agent framework, not surprisingly, but focused on RPA. We're now a professional services partner with them. So building partnerships can be a great way to get deal flow as well, because then you're not even having to sell yourself. Somebody else who is running into the deal flow organically is just recommending you. And that is like so much better, because then you're brought in as the expert. So, the I won't lie, like the leads we get from cold email, they are harder to close than those other leads. So
So how
because
do you set up your referral systems?
yeah, I mean, our referrals is basic. It's like we'll give you 7.5% of the contract value within the first 6 months, which is really good, and that incentivizes people to want to do it, right?
Why 7.5%?
I don't fucking know. I was like, why
it
is
sounds like an
it
exact
any
number.
Yeah, I don't know. I looked at different partner programs, and like a lot of them are like around 5%, some are 10, and like 7.5 sounded to me like
It's just like
that's
smack in the middle.
significant. Yeah, it seems significant enough. Like could I get away with less? Like I don't know, maybe, but I'm also just happy to make people, really want to refer us. So
Certainly.
yeah. Yeah, I can't
There's
say there's much more logic that went into that decision.
there's an agency that I've never worked with them personally, but I'm friends with the founder. They're like a content writing agency based out of New York, and they're called Verbatim Labs. And so
Okay.
they have a very insanely good kind of like client list, Slack, open phone, whatever. And their
Yeah.
whole thing is he will literally go hire like the best content writers, editorial writers, whatever that he can find, poach them from larger organizations, and then, install them into whatever companies he works with. And he sends out these like case studies slash like, kind of like updates to people he considers friends via an email list.
Yeah.
And I'll see those, and I'll read the case study, I'll see like the results. And now every time someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm trying to do anything in like the written scope that like I know he's done before, I send them to him just because I'm invested in seeing
Yep.
how good his agency is from the case studies that he sent me. As someone that has never, I don't think I've ever actually told him that like, hey, by the way, I've sent like 30 people your way this month.
Yeah.
But I just
Right.
know that they're really good. And so I want my friends who are building companies that I've invested in, or I'm friends with the founders, to go through them because I've seen the results he gets for everyone else. And so I
Yeah.
think that building up a private email list of people who you share updates with regularly is
Yeah.
super helpful for referrals.
Yeah, that sounds great. I should do that. I like it.
I had going back to like my example of my roommate who has his recruitment firm. He will post updates on LinkedIn and Twitter. So like kind of what I told you just now with the verbatim, but he'll
Yeah.
just go and update like had a great month this month. our biggest month of growth ever, and then just like share the stories and like share his learnings as he's
Yeah.
building this company, because this is the first company he's ever built. And
Yeah.
he'll make that post talking about like this new client that he helped or some challenge he overcame, or even just like random pictures of the beach when we go to the beach. He'll just put like a photo dump
Yeah.
on Twitter with some like learnings, and then he'll get like 6 new like leads coming in warm saying like, been following your content for a while.
Yes.
I love that beach that you just went to. I wanted to reach out. Like the most like
Yeah.
random obscure reasons for reaching out. And 3 days
Yeah.
later I get the text of like, just close these guys. They're locked in for X, whatever for the first month. And I'm like,
Yep.
wow.
Yeah, totally. I know that. Yeah, that's great. I gotta be honest. Like, I'm not great at the social media game, really. Like, although we got, although this whole thing happened based on a tweet, like, still, like, I'm not a regular poster. Like, and I know I need to do it, and I've been working with an agency to see if they can help me do the content. But like, yeah, it's a great thing to do, and it is one of the. I saw this meme the other day that was like, founders like, I just got into this to build cool shit, and now all of a sudden I have to be a content creator. Like, it's like what? Like, I have to do this now. Like, why? I didn't sign up for this. But it's
Every
kind of
company
true. Like, you got to
operates as a
figure it
media
out.
company now.
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
everyone's dumping money into paid ads too. Like the
yeah,
separation really is organic free content.
no doubt. And there's other tracks or other channels, like I've been speaking more recently, so that's been good. That's been fun. I definitely get leads from that. And like, I think another thing too is just like demonstrating technical expertise, going deep. I see a lot of people successfully do that. I don't do that, but I've seen a lot of people have success with it. It takes a ton of time, right? You really got to like do something interesting and make it public on like Reddit or Twitter or whatever. But if you do that, like, that absolutely generates leads too. So there's so many ways.
How did you get into speaking?
Kind of fell into it. I was the the junior high chaplain in my in my school, and so
That's
I
nice.
yeah, so I did public speaking. Like, every week I spoke in front of my class, and that taught me a lot about public speaking. And so I'm like pretty comfortable on stage. And so, but anyway, like, only in the last couple of months I started to get some gigs around that. And every one of them was just like friends who were like, "Hey, I've got this thing coming up, and I'd love for you to talk or whatever." It was quite organic. I don't have like a super, I don't know, put together like plan on it or whatever, but it just sort of fell into place. And yeah, but it's been great. And there's always a place for people who can speak English and tech. Like, if you can bridge those two things, like, you will be in demand, right? Because most people don't understand tech. Certainly most people don't understand AI, but if you can explain it in a way that's understandable, people like that. They follow that. They find that valuable. Like, maybe not so much on Twitter, because everybody's super technical on Twitter, right? But like, if you're able to do that to, like, for like clients in the real world, that's a massive, massive value.
And then, so if we were to try to wrap everything you've learned in the last 10 months, because you started this agency less than a year ago, which is insane.
Yeah.
What are like the 2 or 3 main frameworks that someone needs to take to go from 0 to 1 with their own dev agency?
Whew, that's a good question. 2 or 3 frameworks. One thing is, like, you need to understand as a founder that your job is to replace yourself as fast as humanly possible at every role, because you start with every role. And so you start as a programmer, you start as the marketer, you start as the content development person, you start as the finance person, right? And so, as soon as humanly possible, you have to get yourself out of those roles, at least in the day-to-day of those roles, so that you can focus on building the business. And if you don't do that, you'll just be bogged down and stressed, and will be unable to scale. So I think that's something that's helped, is I was able to do that, and that allowed us to move pretty quickly. Another thing is, you've got to, just like we've been talking about, you've got to figure out top of funnel. There are a ton of books out there. A great one, like Alex Hormozy has a great book, $100 Million Leads, I think it is.
Good book, yeah.
Yeah, there's like if you're looking for frameworks, like that guy's got it down pat, and but you've got to figure out top of funnel and like don't get complacent. Don't just count on doing good work. If you just do good work, maybe you'll grow, maybe, but like you gotta put in the blood, sweat, and tears on really every front that you possibly can that's giving you the returns, because top of funnel is the hardest problem to solve. Once you solve top of funnel, like, if I get a project and I don't have a dev, I just go hire the dev, right? The hard part is not hiring devs. The hard part is getting the clients, right? So like that, like if you can solve that, like that's the key lever to push for growth. And then, yeah, I think another thing to be concerned about, which I didn't, is part of was, and maybe it's just because it happened so fast. I don't know, but like at the beginning, I kept telling myself like, this whole thing could fall apart. Like it isn't really real. Whatever. And I didn't like. Part of me didn't want to take it too seriously because I didn't want it. Like if it failed, I didn't want to be like, oh, it's my life stream, my life's work. But now I realize like, okay, it is kind of real and culture matters a ton, right? And I wasn't very cognizant of like the culture I was creating. It just sort of happened organically like it does at every company. But having your culture defined, knowing what your values are, and then finding people who match those values is extremely important. So like the people you bring in at the beginning of your journey will define your culture. So make sure that those are awesome people that are consistent with your values. That's so important. So I don't know. I don't know if that's everything you need, but those are some good things probably.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, I feel like that's super helpful. And I'm sure that now that you've been on this episode, you're probably gonna get at least 6 to 7 people in your DMs now, just asking you to hire them for your agency.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I take Zuckerberg's advice on this, like look for drive, look for curiosity, and look for ethics. Like those are really good things to look for especially in a startup. Like drive is so incredibly important. So
And
important.
so, and I ask this question at the end of every episode, which is, if we were to do this podcast again in a year, what is the thing that you would have want to accomplish to consider the past year a success?
Ah, well, I do have a plan. So I've got a 5-year plan. And so I actually know like we need to be at a revenue target of basically like 2.5 million is where I want us to be next year. And we need to have about 40%, or I'm sorry, about 80% as many devs as we have now. So an additional 80% devs. And probably another PM. So if we get there, like in terms of the raw figures, like that will be a success. At a deeper level, I think I want to move the company from now. So like one thing I did is I started with contractors rather than employees, because like at an agency, if you lose a client, then you still have a bunch of mouths to feed. And you're not making any money, right? So if you work with contractors, like, hey, really sorry this happened, but there's no more work, and they're contractors, they get it, they go on to the next contract, life is good. So I've started the company that way, but where I want to move the company is to, not that, to employees and who are people who are more, or get the team that I have even more invested in the success of the company. So I think like I will consider it a success in a year if the team that I have is even more coherent, even more invested in our success, and even more executionally excellent, I would say, because we definitely can work on our execution levels. So yeah, so there's some deeper things.
Well, nice, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great.
Sweet.